All right, it's time for a more concise update and forecast on the park fire. I just did a live stream. I think it went for about 2.5 hours, but I figured nobody wants to rewatch a whole 2.5 hour video, and a lot of conditions changed throughout that live stream. So, what I'm going to try to do is just summarize everything we learned over the last few hours within hopefully 10 to 15 minutes here. So, the reason I started the live stream is this northern side of the fire. This morning, we were actually feeling pretty confident about. We had cool, moist conditions move in over the park fire on Saturday, and they were able to go direct on this part of the fire. And the reason that was such a concern is our winds every day have seemed to be mostly from the south, so that's why this fire has been able to push all the way from Chico almost all the way up to Manton. Within just a few days, it's moved about 40 miles to the north because of those southerly winds. So the fact that this morning we weren't seeing much heat on the northern half of the fire was some great news there. And they were able to go direct. They were able to do some good work. But then this afternoon, we had some spot fires start. And you can actually see some of those spot fires on Inskip Hill right here. And what it looked like, actually, I'll show what the heat signature showed. When I first started the live stream around maybe 4 or 5:30, this was bright red because that hotspot was very active. It was concerning because we had strong southwesterly winds that were going to try to push that hotspot directly into Manton, directly into Shingletown. But amazingly, when we look at the 6-hour loop of these spot fires starting, you'll see a number of them actually start here. Maybe, I think I saw one report there's over 10, and it was able to cross. Before we continue to look at that, I should point out the watch duty update that started this all. It said the spot fire previously noted across Lanes Valley Road is approximately 200 acres in grass. So zooming in to our fire perimeter here, here's Inskip Hill, and then right there, you can see Lanes Valley Road. So that's what the spot fires had jumped over. So that's where that heat is on the northern side. And then that's what some of these spots are on this video. And, this was concerning. At one point, you could see how much smoke is coming off of that spot fire. Our weather conditions in this area, here's Manton. There's going to be Inskip Hill. Closest weather station is maybe that one. Shows 90 degrees this afternoon, minimum relative humidity around 20%. The one thing that I think worked in our favor, max wind gusts 13 miles per hour. That's not too bad right there. This station up here did show a 20 mile per hour wind gust, but overall, not nearly as windy as previous days. And you can actually tell that based on this imagery right here. Whereas if it's windy, your smoke plume is going to be a lot more bent over. It's going to be more like that. Whereas you notice the smoke plume going very vertical. So that tells you that the winds aren't that strong. And then pretty cool shot of the retardant being dropped right there. And that's the reason this spot fire didn't just take off and go straight into Manton and Shingletown, which is amazing because a lot of these fuels, if we turn on fire history, those fuels haven't been burned out in decades. And we've seen what happened previously on this fire when it was hot, dry, with some afternoon winds. It would just take off, burn 4,000 to 5,000 acres per hour. Whereas this one, in large part thanks to a lot of those air operations, watch what happens. It goes from looking very active towards Shingletown to not much activity at all. You look at this is going to be the last hour now. And it looks like they're still doing some air operations there, but that looks great. So amazing what they were able to do on that hotspot of the fire. Now, with all that being said, it's not all good news on the park fire because you can see how much heat is coming off of the northeastern section of the fire. And that actually looks a little bit hotter than the last time that I looked at it. And zooming in here, you could see almost 3 to potentially even 4 different pyrocumulus clouds right there. Where you see that white, that's going to be where you're getting a lot of heat down at the surface. So a lot of rising motion. And then the key thing that we were talking about in the 2.5 hour live stream was throughout the live stream, we actually saw the wind direction change. So at the very beginning of this loop, you notice how the smoke is going more towards the north-northeast because we had southwesterly winds. But then towards the end of this loop, so in the last hour or two, that smoke starts shifting a lot more from the west, pushing the fire to the east. Now the reason that's concerning is because we have two different communities that we're thinking about here. We have Butte Meadows, which is this little cluster of orange dots, which represents the community. That's Butte Meadows. And then we have Mineral up here. Now, one community that actually likes the winds turning more westerly is going to be Sky Ranch, which is in this little protected pocket. Maybe I'll just go perimeter only while I point this out. See how you have those structures in there? The previous fire perimeter is almost just perfectly around those structures, so amazing work done on Sky Ranch. And then it did look like they'd stopped it at 36. And it probably helps that we had the Ponderosa fire here in 2012 as well, where some of that fuel would have been cleared out. But it seems like they, on this part of the fire, so the very northeastern section, they're able to hold the fire at 36. And that's also where you could say it's a benefit that the winds look to shift a lot more from the west, is instead of a southerly wind picking up burning embers, having it toss over 36 and then just taking off into a lot of these fuels that haven't been burned out in decades, the westerly wind is going to push this fire more towards the east. And when we look at the current heat detections, that's exactly what we're seeing. A lot of that heat right there. The red is going to show where the largest amount of heat is coming off of the fire at the moment. And we can actually look at what this fire looks like from the side. So I'm actually going to refresh this because it looks like things have maybe started to pick up again. When I ended my live stream, it looked like things were improving. So let's actually go to a 3-hour loop right here. So you'll notice a couple of pyrocumulus clouds pop up pretty soon here. This is the peak of the afternoon and evening when our temperatures, and we got up to 90 today, relative humidity around 20, wind gusts 15 to 20 miles per hour, which isn't as bad as last Thursday, Friday, which is why we didn't see as much growth today, but certainly still had activity. And you know what? It looks like the fire has laid down. Earlier, remember, you're seeing these big pyrocumulus clouds. Forget where it is exactly, but a couple areas where it's kind of popping up. You see those little white caps right there. That tells you that fire activity is very extreme. And then you look at it more recently, kind of looks like the fire's starting to lie down. And that's one great thing about the weather forecast tonight is, remember last week our winds were remaining around 20 to 25 miles per hour even in the overnight hours. That's why in that first day of the park fire I was able to grow 45,000 acres overnight. Whereas tonight, look at that, we had some strong wind gusts this afternoon, but as we get into the overnight hours, 11 p.m., that shows a 12 mile per hour gust, which means your sustained winds are going to be 3 to 4 mile per hour. And then by tomorrow morning, the winds decrease even more. That's almost non-existent. So hopefully they're able to get in here and do some great work overnight, because I am pretty concerned about Mineral up here because all of that fuel has not been burned out in decades, and I don't see a lot of good options for what they're going to be able to do in this area between the fire and Mineral, and that's one of the most active parts of the fire that we had throughout the day today, and actually still looks like there's a lot of heat coming off of that part of the fire at the moment. We can measure it out though, so keep in mind these squares right here aren't nearly as accurate as your fire perimeter is going to be, but it's the best information that we have to go off of. So let's just assume that the fire perimeter has moved out to here at this point. That's still going to be about 5.5 miles from Mineral. So that's a decent amount of distance, but we have seen this fire move 15 to 20 miles in a single day. Luckily, not expecting to have as bad of conditions tomorrow as what we had on those days where it did burn 15 to 20 miles. But just based on how dry, how abundant, how much of a lack of fire history we have in this area, definitely concerned about Mineral tomorrow, especially given the fact that tomorrow afternoon Once again, the winds are going to be picking up to around 20 to potentially 25 mile per hour gusts, and it's from the southwest. So that's going to try to take this heat that we have out there right now and continue to push the fire closer towards mineral. Now, where I'd say there's good news, it doesn't look like those strong winds are as widespread as in previous days. It also doesn't look like they're as strong in previous days. With that being said, we are supposed to be, I believe, a little bit hotter and a little bit drier out there tomorrow, although the winds aren't supposed to be as strong. And that's usually what happens when you have a big ridge moving over California, is your temperature goes up, your relative humidity goes down, so that's bad for wildfire. But usually a big high pressure is associated with calmer winds, so that's good. And I would say winds have been the biggest factor on this fire, why it was able to grow 40 miles in one day. Or not one day, but over the span of a few days, it went from 40 miles from Chico almost up to Manton. And that was largely because of the southerly winds. So tomorrow looks like we have those southwesterly winds. And then, again, concerned about mineral because of that. But also concerned about Butte Meadows over here. And this is actually something that not only concerned about tomorrow, but actually still concerned about right now, just because of the limited information we've been able to gather about this area. Now, one great thing is that with the cool, moist conditions over the weekend, they were able to take advantage of that, and they put in this firing operation that you can see on this map goes right along 32. So you see 32 right there. They basically light the fire, it backs down the hill, clears out those fuels, so that by the time the fire gets to those fuels, they've been cleared out. Hopefully the fire stops and you don't get a spot fire that just jumps over it. But a lot of times when there are spot fires, they get some helicopters on it and they're able to handle that, like we saw today on the northern side of the fire. But where my biggest concern has been, and I'd say still is on this little opening where the firing operation doesn't connect all the way to the fire perimeter, and we were still seeing some heat right there. And then you have 32 right along there. So what we could actually tell they were trying to do today was basically hold the fire to the west of 32. Seems like there's too much smoke on it right now for the helicopters, but they were doing continual drops on this western side of 32, which was some good news. It made us believe that the fire hadn't jumped 32 yet, and I haven't seen any indications that it has jumped 32 at this point, so that's good news there. But where the concern came from was when that wind shifted direction. When it was mostly from the south, that was good news for Butte Meadows because it was going to try to basically push the fire up towards the north. But then when you look at the satellite imagery, those winds shift from the west, pushing almost directly to the east. So then that makes us a bit more worried about that little opening that we have right there, that there might be a burning ember that gets picked up, or the fire just pushes through over 32, and then you have Butte Meadows right there. Now, with all that being said, while we are still seeing a lot of heat on that side of the fire, we're seeing decreased activity right now compared to a couple hours ago. Winds are significantly decreasing overnight tonight, and it actually looks like it comes from a bit more from the east towards the west, which would hopefully try to push that heat back in on itself. So as of right now, looks like we have dodged a bullet for Butte Meadows, but that is the area that's the first thing I'm going to check when I wake up tomorrow morning. Now, with all that being said, I have to wake up tomorrow morning at 3 a.m. for my morning shift. I'm a meteorologist for KSBW on the Central Coast, so I probably should be wrapping this up. I guess the final thing I'll say is the southern end of this fire still looking great in places like Chico, Paradise, Magalia. I believe I saw an update that they actually even changed some of the evacuation orders for Forest Ranch to evacuation warnings, which is good news, but as always, don't take my word for it when it comes to evacuation orders and warnings, because by the time you're watching this video, they might have changed. Definitely good to remember to always take those orders seriously, though. And then just updating our acreage, looks like it's up to 373,000 And yeah, that is the most recent number right there, which makes it the number 6 largest wildfire in the history of California. And it does still look like there's a lot of unburnt fuel out on this northeastern side. So we're most likely going to continue to see some growth there. Overall, though, I would say the best news today is that they took that hotspot on the northern side of the fire that easily could have pushed towards Manton and Shingletown, and it looks like that has significantly decreased in activity right there. We'll just fast forward to the end, where you can see not much smoke coming off of it right now, and then winds significantly calming down overnight tonight, which is really going to help the firefighters out there. So top places I'm watching tomorrow, Butte Meadows and Mineral, because this northeastern section of the fire is certainly still the most active. But for the time being, I gotta go eat some dinner, get to bed, wake up at 3 a.m. I'll hopefully have another update for you at 9:30 tomorrow morning, and then most likely again tomorrow afternoon if activity seems to be picking up, which it most likely will be as things get hotter and drier. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.